Good morning, Mount Rainier. I'm Chief Anthony Morgan. I'm excited to talk to you today. This is our first endeavor at doing our weekly community policing update where I get to talk directly to you. So a couple of things I want to get into before I go right into what's been going on in our city here for the last week. I want to let you know that your police department is very responsive to the concerns of the community. We know that we've had a little bit of violence here over the last few weeks. Overall, we are still a very safe city. But anytime something happens, a natural question is, what are the police doing? So some of the things that we've been doing here, and it just hasn't been this last week, it's been really over the course of the last couple of months, is we've put on extra patrols, mostly during the evening to try to address criminal conduct in our community. During this past week, we had a homicide on the 10th. That homicide was drug related. So this wasn't a random shooting. This wasn't an event that was random in nature at all. This was unfortunately two individuals, one showing up and the other showing up, and then poor decisions were made and it led to the death of a young man. So we are certainly offer our condolences to the family of the victim, and we are working vigorously and tirelessly to bring the shooter to justice. So what have we been doing in that area? We've been trying to address our border streets because we do know in both this recent homicide and then the shooting we had in May, both shooters came to our city from outside of the area. So we're trying to address individuals as they walk into Mount Rainier. So we're putting more patrols focusing on some of those border streets. Over the course of last week, we've made a warrant arrest of a gentleman from Baltimore. We've seized drugs out of a vehicle from a DC resident that was hanging out in that area. And we're going to continue to conduct traffic, make contact with people. But something that is very important, we've been stressing here for quite some time, is if you see something, say something. Residents in the neighborhoods know exactly who lives in their community. They know what makes sense, what doesn't fit. And a lot of times people can be uncomfortable sometimes calling the police because they don't want anyone to think that they're prejudging a situation and they don't want to be wrong. We're an organization that treats everybody with dignity and respect. So whether you're right or wrong doesn't matter. We just want you to call because we're going to encounter and talk to everyone the same, which means that whether or not someone's doing something right or something wrong, they're going to get the same level of professionalism from this police department. We just want to make sure that you're calling. So as we ramp up those patrols in these key areas, and we ask for citizens to call, part of what we're doing right now is the community canvas. And so once we make it over to some of these border streets, we're going to get to know the residents there a lot better. And so ourselves as a police department, we'll know what doesn't fit. We'll know who lives there, who doesn't, from talking to folks. And then we ask that as we canvass, some of the residents we've already gotten to talk to, please as well, tell us what's going on in your neighborhood. And those are all things that we're going to address. We want you to know that we are putting in the effort, and on the flip side is the follow through to address your concerns. With that being said, I'm going to dive right into what's been going on over the last week. So from July 9th to July 15th, your officers should spend a total of 31 hours on foot in your community. Every day officers are required to spend at least an hour on foot in the neighborhoods, and during the last week they spent 31 hours on foot in your community. We've initiated during the last week and issued 128 citations to violators for traffic violations, issued 62 parking citations, and 2 vehicles have impounded. Now I'm going to talk about some of the calls for services we've had during the last week that we've cut case numbers on. So just a little bit about the difference. A lot of times we respond to reports of fights or loud noise, those kind of things. We get there, either the problem's moved or we don't see it, or it doesn't warrant a criminal complaint. We respond to far more calls than we ever will that we actually cut case numbers on because the elements of a crime often aren't there. So what I'm going to highlight are the cases that we responded to that required a criminal case number, meaning that a crime occurred. So on the 9th at 3:25 in the afternoon, we responded to our station. A citizen came in to report that the theft of their cell phone. They used a Uber and left their phone in the Uber. Several hours later, they realized their phone was gone, tried to contact the driver, of course, had other people in the car, and the phone was gone. So that's can be a very difficult case to prove because he had so many different people in the car, and so a cell phone was taken. On the 9th also, officers made contact with a male in the 3400 block of Rhode Island, basically at near the bus stop, who was sitting on a bench. This male that officers made contact with had several warrants for his arrest, and he was arrested. Another thing that happened on the 10th, Officers responded to a report of a male that had pulled a handgun on his neighbor, and this occurred in the 4400 block of 34th Street. I actually responded to this call as well. The suspect fled on his bike through several streets, so we were chasing him in our vehicles. He was captured just in the DC. The suspect, when the officers made contact with him, removed a handgun from his waistband and set it on the ground. And I want to commend my officers for the restraint they showed in this case, because we didn't know what he was going to do with it. And when we're faced with a situation like that in which deadly force can be warranted, they acted appropriately. The suspect laid the gun on the ground and he was arrested. He's going to be facing several charges related to this incident. On the 10th at 9:42 p.m., we became aware of the homicide I spoke of earlier at 37th and Shepherd. The initial problems that we had was a shooting victim showed up at a DC hospital. He was suffering from a gunshot wound. He died. Because he showed up at a DC hospital, the immediate thought was maybe this occurred in DC. So it took hours to work through that it didn't occur there, the thought that it occurred in Brentwood, and then finally to locate the location at 37th and Shepherd. As I said earlier, this was two known individuals, and this was a drug deal gone bad. The dealer does not live in the city, and neither did the buyer. They just happened to pick that intersection for the deal today, that particular day. And we are looking for the individual. He is known. He has open warrants for his arrest related to the homicide. On the 11th at 4:30 in the morning, officers made contact with a male sleeping on the sidewalk in the 4000 block of 30th Street. This male was in possession of drug paraphernalia. He was issued a criminal citation. On the 12th at 5:20 p.m., officers responded to an assault in the 4000 block of 35th Street. A pizza delivery driver was just doing his job in delivering a pizza when an individual wearing no shirt ran up on him and for no reason just started punching him. We received a call, officers responded. The male then fled the area on foot. We canvassed, but we weren't able to locate him. And this is kind of really a sad situation for the driver who's just doing his job, but we have a description of the male and we're going to be vigilant in looking for him. Also on the 12th at 10:37 p.m., officers at 36th and Shepherd made contact with a male they didn't recognize as being a Mount Rainier resident. This male was a Baltimore resident, and he was arrested on outstanding warrants. On the 14th, in the 4100 block of 30th Street, officers responded to a report of a stolen bike. One thing we always want to remind folks is if you can, please lock your bikes up. It's one thing we know it's convenient to leave it right on your porch, but please lock your bike up. Also on the 14th at 9:25 a.m., officers made contact in the 3300 block of Buchanan with the victim of another stolen bike. In this case, the bike was actually stolen on the 13th. The citizen didn't report it. However, he found his stolen bike chained up on Buchanan Street. We were able to break the chain and get the citizen back the bike that was stolen. We don't know who stole the bike. Unfortunately, it was tied up in there where we couldn't determine the thief in this case. On the 15th, we had another theft in the 3200 block of Rhode Island. This call came in at 3 a.m. We're still investigating this because there's some details here that aren't supported by video evidence. A gentleman said he had been drinking. He then got into his vehicle where he fell asleep. He had all of his windows rolled down, and then he's alleging someone reached into his vehicle and stole his phone. Obviously, we have cameras in the 3200 block of Rhode Island, and we didn't see anyone reach in and steal it. Because the subject was intoxicated, it can be very difficult to determine the truth of what happened. We do believe his phone was stolen, but the exact location is still under investigation. 37th and Shepherd on the 15th at 11:20 p.m. Officers made contact with a vehicle parked at the intersection. This vehicle had DC plates. The occupant of the vehicle was from DC, and officers seized narcotics from the vehicle. And then the last case that we have during this reporting period is in the 3800 block of 37th Street. This was at 5:10 p.m. on the 15th. Officers responded on a report of a theft. A UPS had delivered a package of phones to a resident, and then an unknown suspect had walked up and stolen the package. And this is where it's really important, if you see something, say something. If you see somebody you don't know on your neighbor's property removing an item, please call us. We certainly want to prevent these kind of things and address them. Obviously, we can't be everywhere, but we certainly can do a good job of responding when people call. MRPD, or MRTV, I want to thank you for filming this for us. And to the community at large, I want you to know that your police department is here for you. as the chief. If you have any concerns at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And we look forward to kind of having this weekly dialogue of letting you know what's going on in our community, letting you know what we're doing about it. So that way you know you have a police department that truly cares and is here to serve you. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you soon.